The flight felt longer than it actually was, not because of turbulence, because hope is heavy when you haven't carried it in a while. For nearly 6 years, family contact had existed mostly through holiday texts and occasional phone calls that never lasted very long. So when my father called and said, "Come home for a few days, we should reconnect," I almost didn't believe him. Then he offered to pay for the ticket. That was what convinced me. Not the money itself, the effort. It felt like someone was finally reaching across a distance that had been growing for years. During the flight, I kept replaying old memories. Nothing dramatic, just familiar roles. My brother was the adventurous one. I was the dependable one. If plans fell apart, I adjusted. If someone needed help, I showed up. For most of my life, those roles seemed harmless. At the airport, my father hugged me tightly. For a moment, I thought maybe I had been right to come. Then my brother appeared. He handed me a diaper bag. I remember staring at it before looking at him. Behind him stood his 2 children, both under 7. My brother smiled, the kind of smile people wear when they believe a conversation has already happened. "We've got to get going," he said. I waited. There had to be more. "There was a good deal on flights to Europe," he continued. "We'll be gone a couple weeks." I looked toward my father. Nobody seemed confused. Nobody seemed concerned. The realization arrived slowly. I wasn't there for a reunion. I was there because they needed childcare, not asked, needed. The decision had apparently been made before my plane even left. I don't remember saying much after that. Shock has a way of making silence look like agreement. Over the next 2 days, everyone acted as though the arrangement were completely normal. My father talked about sightseeing ideas for the kids. My brother sent photos from airports. Nobody asked whether I had consented. Nobody asked whether I had plans. The children themselves weren't the problem. They were good kids, funny, curious, completely unaware of the situation surrounding them. That made everything harder. One evening, after putting them to bed, I started reviewing practical details, medical information, emergency contacts, insurance authorization forms. At first, I was simply trying to be responsible. Then I noticed something strange. Important documents were missing, permissions were vague, several questions had no clear answers. Who had legal authority to approve emergency treatment? Who was designated for school matters? Who had formally agreed to care for the children during international travel? The more I looked, the less comfortable I became. The arrangement seemed built almost entirely on assumptions. The next morning, I made several phone calls, not emotional ones, practical ones, the kind that begin with, "I need clarification regarding responsibility for 2 minors." One conversation led to another. Eventually, I spoke with the children's mother, my brother's ex-wife. We had never been particularly close, but her reaction told me everything. Long silence, then questions, many questions, questions she clearly believed she already knew the answers to. By the end of the call, she sounded less angry than alarmed. Within 48 hours, she was involved directly. Legal custody rights weren't complicated. She was a parent. I wasn't. The situation changed quickly once proper information reached the people responsible for making decisions. Arrangements were made. The children were transferred into her care. Everything happened through normal channels. No courtroom drama, no dramatic confrontations, just adults following procedures that should have existed from the beginning. The phone started ringing the next day. My brother called first, then again, then several more times. When I finally answered, he skipped every greeting. "What did you do?" The question surprised me because from my perspective, I hadn't done very much. I had asked questions. Other people had answered them. Consequences followed. Apparently, the news reached them while they were already overseas. The vacation changed immediately. Flights were rebooked. Plans were interrupted. Panic replaced confidence. For years, my brother had relied on the assumption that family would absorb complications for him. This time, reality refused. The most difficult call came from my father, not because he was angry, because he sounded genuinely confused. "I just thought helping family was what we do." I sat quietly for a moment. Then I said something I had never said before. "Helping isn't the same thing as being volunteered." The line stayed silent, not hostile, just silent, as if he were hearing the difference for the first time. Maybe I was too. A week later, I flew home. The situation remained messy. My brother was furious. His ex-wife was protective. My father seemed caught between regret and defensiveness. Nobody gathered for a healing conversation. Nobody delivered a speech. Life rarely works that way. Months passed. Communication became cautious, sometimes awkward, sometimes absent. But one thing changed permanently. People started asking, not assuming, not assigning, asking. The children were safe. The adults eventually handled their own responsibilities. And I learned something uncomfortable about myself. I had spent years believing that being dependable meant saying yes. What I discovered was that real dependability sometimes begins with an honest no, not to punish anyone, not to prove a point, simply to return responsibility to the people who already owned it. The family never fully returned to what it had been before, but looking back, I think that was inevitable, because what looked like peace had often been expectation wearing a friendlier face, and once you recognize the difference, it's very difficult to pretend you don't.